Well, let's talk about this clip right now, because this is what CNN does better than anything else that they do. They do dumb chatter. They do meaningless programming. That's all true. They do, both sides do it. That's right. But nobody does ginning up and counting down to war like CNN. I mean, this is how they made their hay back in the day, as it were. Was it back when Wolf Blitzer was that 2003, or was that the Kuwait War? I think it was the
Wolf Blitzer
Kuwait
has
War.
Been doing this.
It was the
since
invasion.
The early 90s.
It was the invasion of Kuwait, I believe it was.
You mean
where
the
Wolf
Gulf War, the Gulf
War, where Wolf Blitzer was in a hotel, I believe, in Kuwait. Maybe it was. Am I confusing this? Am I conflating it?
Kuwait and the Gulf War.
He was a war correspondent.
Yeah.
He was making his hay as Wolf Blitzer with a vest, and like one of those fishing vests or a reporter vests that they wear. I got my recorder here and I got my pen over here, and I got no problem with that vest. Actually, I love that vest. But this is where he made, and this is where, in many respects, CNN sort of made their mark. And so there's something built into the DNA of CNN that just sort of is craven in their desire and voracious in their desire for a new war. And here is Glenn Greenwald on with Brian Stetler, who apparently thinks that Glenn Greenwald is just shilling for the president, apparently, which is hilarious because, again, look, do 5 minutes of worth of research. It doesn't take much. Didn't they come up with like a whole name for like Glenn Greenwald, like emo progs, or wasn't there some other like name that they had?
Emo prog, that was
for people who maligned Obama. It's unbelievable. Here's Glenn Greenwald telling the media host Brian Stetler on his CNN program that CNN has been really excited about war.
You've said this week that the media is trying to stoke that id part of our brain, the part that wants fiercer military action against ISIS. You've said the press is even hungry for war. How do you back up that assertion?
The lesson that the American media supposedly learned after the 9/11 attack was that allowing political and military and intelligence officials to make all kinds of claims without scrutinizing and questioning and pushing them back is a really destructive thing to do. It propagandizes the population. It leads to things like torture, Guantanamo, the attack on Iraq, based on false pretenses. And I think you've seen that exact behavior, but even worse, from the overwhelming majority of the media in the last 9 days since the Paris attack.
Even worse.
Unfortunately, Brian, I think that CNN has actually unfortunately led the way in this. You have had one intelligence official with the CIA or formerly with the CIA after the next gone on air, able to say all kinds of extremely dubious claims that print journalists have repeatedly in Bloomberg News and the New Yorker on the New York Times editorial page are totally false. And
so
there's
you're
zero
specifically
pushback.
talking
like
about
encryption. Journalists are afraid. Talking about encryption, about why this terrorist attack happened, about more powers that are needed, about the need to go in and attack ISIS with ground troops as well. But I do think that that's the other aspect, is there has been this really alarming anti-Muslim climate cultivated in this country, not just by Republican candidates like Donald Trump talking about making them carry ID cards and putting them in databases and closing mosques, but by the American media itself. And I think the worst example, probably the most despicable interview we've seen in the last several years, were two CNN anchors, John Valls and Sasha Issei, who told a French Muslim political activist that he and all other Muslims bear, quote, responsibility for the attack in Paris because all Muslims must somehow be responsible. You could
but
never
there is
say
a
that
difference
about
between
another group.
asking questions and making statements. You say they told him that. They were asking a series of questions. I know it went viral online.
No. They made statements both when he was on and then after he left. They said the word responsibility comes to mind.
Yeah, and just even that sort of framing. They were just asking questions. Yes, like, well, have you stopped beating your wife lately? That's just a question.
Are you scared of the Muslims in your neighborhood?
Right.
It's just an inquiry.
Are you afraid that someone's going to realize that you're not really qualified for that job?
Sam, when you beat your wife, do you prefer to use objects or just your fists?
Do you think that as people watch you on your television show, they're going to find out that your cousin is a high place to CNN official?